The first warning came from the Outer Rim worlds where mining ships simply vanished without sending distress signals. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing cargo manifests aboard the transport vessel Freedom's Edge when the emergency broadcast interrupted normal communications. The message was short and terrifying. Something had awakened in the dead systems, the uncharted space, and it was moving toward populated worlds. The Kthmore had slept for 1,000 years in the cold depths of space, waiting for the galaxy to forget their existence. They were nightmares made real, standing 12 feet tall with obsidian black exoskeletons that could deflect energy weapons and claws, sharp enough to cut through starship hulls. Their leader, Vexar the Endless, had ruled the galaxy before most species had even developed spaceflight, and now he had awakened to find his territory filled with what he considered prey. The first worlds to fall were the peaceful Zentari trading colonies. The Zentari were gentle beings who had never known war, spending their lives creating beautiful art and conducting honest commerce throughout the galaxy. When the Kthmore ships appeared in their skies, the Zentari tried to communicate and offer gifts. The response was swift and brutal. Entire cities were harvested within hours, with the survivors taken as food for the journey to the next world. Dr. Lisa Carter was studying xenobiology samples in her laboratory on Research Station Kepler 7 when the news reports began flooding in. The images were horrific: Zentari cities burning, their crystalline structures shattered, and strange black ships moving through the wreckage like predators surveying their kills. Lisa had spent years studying alien life forms, but nothing in her research had prepared her for creatures like this. The Garthic Empire, known throughout the galaxy for their advanced military technology and warrior culture, lasted only 3 weeks against the Kthmore assault. The Garthak had ships that could destroy planets and weapons that could punch holes through moons, but their enemies moved too fast for targeting systems to track. The Kthmore would appear without warning, tear apart defensive fleets with their bare claws, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. On the industrial world of Titan's Gate, construction foreman Danny Walsh watched his alien co-workers abandon their posts as panic spread through the workforce. The Vraxian engineers who had worked alongside humans for decades were packing their belongings and booking passage on the first ships heading toward the galactic core. Danny had grown up in the harsh Australian outback where everything from spiders to snakes could kill you in minutes, and he found himself oddly calm as he studied the scattered reports coming in from the outer systems. The attacks followed a pattern that reminded Danny of predator behavior from Earth. The Kthmore would strike at the edges of populated systems first, cutting off escape routes and communication lines. Then they would move toward the main population centers, herding their prey into concentrated areas where harvesting would be most efficient. It was smart, methodical, and absolutely terrifying for species that had never faced anything like it. News of the Kthmore spread faster than their ships could travel. Entire star systems were evacuating toward the galactic core, creating massive refugee streams that overwhelmed every safe haven. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral world of Harmony Station, but their unity crumbled as species after species declared neutrality or offered immediate surrender to avoid being targeted. Ambassador Kate Phillips sat quietly in the council chambers, taking notes while alien representatives shouted at each other in fear and desperation. The Vraxians demanded immediate military action, while the soft ones insisted that peaceful negotiation was the only solution. The Crystalline Collective had already voted to seal their borders and abandon the Outer Rim worlds to their fate. When the Council President finally called for Earth's position, Ambassador Phillips stood slowly and addressed the chamber with calm authority. She explained that humanity was still gathering information about the threat, and would respond appropriately once they understood what they were facing. The other species interpreted this as typical human caution, but Phillips knew that Earth's military leaders were already mobilizing for something very different from evacuation. Captain Alex Rodriguez received his deployment orders while stationed on the frontier world of Kepler 442b. His small unit of former Marines had been assigned to oversee the evacuation of mining facilities. But the orders from Earth Command were clear: establish defensive positions and prepare for extended combat operations. The other species representatives thought the humans had gone insane, choosing to fight creatures that had destroyed entire empires. The first direct encounter between humans and Kthmore occurred when a scouting party landed on the research station Kepler 7. Dr. Lisa Carter was alone in her laboratory when the power failed and emergency lighting bathed everything in red. She could hear something moving in the corridors outside, something large and predatory that made clicking sounds as it walked. The Kthmore warrior that entered Lisa's laboratory was a perfect killing machine. Its exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, and its claws left deep gouges in the metal floor with each step. When it saw Lisa, it paused for a moment, studying her with multifaceted eyes that showed no emotion except predatory interest. Most prey species would have frozen in terror or tried to run, but Lisa did something unexpected. She grabbed a portable scanner and started recording everything she could about the creature's biology. The Kthmore warrior was puzzled by this behavior. In 1,000 years of hunting, no prey had ever tried to study it. Lisa backed slowly toward the emergency exit, keeping the scanner focused on the creature while noting its movement patterns, joint articulation, and potential weak points. The warrior followed her with casual confidence, assuming she was simply a more interesting type of prey. When Lisa reached the emergency exit, she did something that would later be studied by xenobiologists throughout the galaxy. She turned off the scanner, looked directly at the Kthmore warrior, and spoke to it in calm, measured tones. She told it that humanity had studied every report of Kthmore attacks and was no longer afraid. She explained that Earth had produced its own predators for millions of years, and humans had learned how to survive them all. The Kthmore warrior attacked then, moving with speed that would have been impossible for most organic beings to track. But Lisa had spent years working in dangerous environments and had trained extensively in emergency response procedures. She activated the emergency bulkhead seal and dove through the closing hatch, leaving the warrior trapped in the laboratory section while she made her way to the station's communication center. The message that Lisa Carter broadcast to the human fleet would become one of the most important communications in galactic history. She provided detailed biological analysis of Kthmore anatomy, movement patterns, and behavior, while the sounds of the trapped warrior trying to break through the bulkhead could be heard in the background. Her final words were simple and direct: they could be killed and humanity would prove it. The mining world of Kepler 442b should have been evacuated like every other frontier settlement, but Captain Alex Rodriguez had different orders from Earth Command. His small team of former Marines was told to dig in and prepare defensive positions, while the rest of the galaxy fled toward safer systems. The other species thought humans had lost their minds, choosing to fight creatures that had destroyed entire empires in weeks. Alex spent 3 days studying every available recording of Kthmore attacks while his team transformed the mining settlement into something resembling a fortress. They had learned valuable lessons from Dr. Lisa Carter's encounter on the research station. The Kthmore were fast and strong, but they hunted like predators from a world where prey always ran or hid. Earth had taught humanity different lessons about survival. The mining facility sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills that provided natural defensive positions. Alex's team used mining explosives to create choke points and kill zones, while setting up overlapping fields of fire from positions that could be easily abandoned when the enemy adapted. They had studied the way Kthmore moved through previous battlefields and designed their defenses to funnel the attackers into predetermined paths. Sergeant Danny Walsh had joined Alex's team after evacuating his construction crews from Titan's Gate. He brought with him detailed knowledge of alien psychology and behavior patterns that proved invaluable in predicting how the Kthmore would approach their attack. Danny had noticed that the ancient predators followed hunting patterns that were efficient but predictable to anyone who understood predator behavior. The first Kthmore scout arrived on the 4th day, a single warrior sent to assess the settlement before the main assault. Most prey species would have hidden or tried to negotiate, but Alex had positioned his team to observe and engage the scout from multiple angles. The warrior moved through the settlement with casual confidence, expecting to find cowering victims or empty buildings. Instead, it found humans who had turned every structure into a potential trap. The scout triggered the first explosive device when it entered the main administrative building, but its exoskeleton protected it from the blast. What the explosion did accomplish was to announce the beginning of a very different kind of hunt than the Kthmore had ever experienced. Alex's team opened fire from concealed positions using weapons, specifically chosen for their ability to penetrate. Alien armor. The scout found itself under attack from multiple directions by enemies who refused to run even when it charged directly at them. The warrior killed 2 humans in the first exchange, but it also received injuries that would have been impossible against any other species, the Kthmore. Warrior retreated to reassess the situation, something that had never happened in recorded galactic history. It had encountered prey that not only fought back but had actually wounded it in the process. The scout's report to the main Kthmore fleet described humans as an unknown type of predator that used pack tactics and seemed to have no fear of death. Dr. Lisa Carter had escaped the research station and joined a growing network of human scientists who were studying every aspect of Kthmore biology and behavior. Her detailed scans of the warrior she encountered provided crucial information about their anatomy and potential weaknesses. The data showed that their exoskeletons were designed to deflect energy weapons and slashing attacks but had vulnerable joints that could be exploited by precise impacts. The information spread through human communication networks faster than official military channels could distribute it. Human civilians on dozens of worlds began modifying their tools and weapons. Based on Lisa's biological analysis, construction equipment became siege weapons, mining charges became precision explosives, and ordinary humans started developing tactics for fighting creatures that had terrorized the galaxy on Earth. Admiral Susan Brooks was coordinating the first major military response to the Kthmore threat. Unlike other species that had tried to match the aliens' overwhelming force with superior technology, human military doctrine focused on asymmetric warfare and adaptive tactics. The Earth Defense Force began deploying small units to contested worlds with orders to engage and observe rather than hold territory. The main Kthmore assault on Kepler 442 became with overwhelming force. 3 full warriors supported by aerial attack drones descended on the mining settlement, expecting to complete their harvest within hours. What they found instead was a carefully prepared battlefield where every advantage they possessed had been anticipated and countered. The humans had abandoned the settlement itself and positioned themselves in the surrounding hills where their weapons could engage the Kthmore at maximum range. The warriors found themselves fighting uphill against enemies who used the terrain to mask their movements and create overlapping fields of fire. Every time the Kthmore adapted to one tactic, the humans would shift to another approach. Alex Rodriguez had studied every available recording of Kthmore combat techniques and noticed something crucial. They were perfect hunters but inexperienced fighters. The warriors were accustomed to prey that ran or hid, not enemies that actively coordinated attacks and used sacrificial tactics to achieve strategic objectives. Human military doctrine had been shaped by centuries of warfare against other humans, creating a mindset that confused and frustrated the alien predators. The battle lasted 18 hours, far longer than any previous Kthmore engagement. The humans used hit-and-run tactics, coordinated ambush, and deliberate sacrificial attacks to wear down their enemies. When one warrior finally fell to concentrated fire from multiple directions, the psychological impact on the remaining Kthmore was devastating. They had never seen one of their own killed by prey species. The surviving Kthmore warriors retreated from Kepler 442b, but the damage to their reputation had already been done. News of the human victory spread through refugee populations and resistance networks throughout the galaxy. Other species began to realize that the ancient predators were not invincible, and that humans had found ways to fight them effectively. Danny Walsh coordinated the evacuation of wounded human defenders while Alex Rodriguez compiled detailed reports on Kthmore combat capabilities and weaknesses. Their analysis would become the foundation for training programs that would spread throughout the galaxy, teaching other species how to fight like humans when faced with superior predators. The Battle of Kepler 442b changed everything. The Kthmore had lost their first warrior to prey species, while humanity had proven that their approach to warfare could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The galaxy watched in amazement as humans began volunteering for deployment to contested worlds rather than fleeing to safety. The age of predators was about to encounter something they had never faced before, prey that refused to act like prey. The Kthmore war fleet arrived at Earth expecting to find another world full of cowering prey ready for harvest. Vexar the Endless led the assault personally, intrigued by reports of humans who had dared to fight back against his warriors. The ancient predator had ruled the galaxy for centuries before going into hibernation, and no species had ever presented him with a real challenge. Earth appeared completely dead when the Kthmore ships entered the solar system. There were no communication signals, no energy signatures from major cities, and no signs of orbital defenses. The planet looked like it had been abandoned in panic, with only scattered debris from evacuation ships floating in space. Vexar was disappointed by this apparent surrender, but decided to investigate personally. The first Kthmore landing parties found cities that seemed to have been evacuated in haste. New York, London, Tokyo, and other major population centers were empty but intact, with no signs of the desperate fighting that had marked other worlds. The streets were clear, the buildings were undamaged, and there was no evidence of the mass panic that usually preceded Kthmore attacks. Colonel Ryan Hayes was hiding in a carefully prepared position 30 floors above street level in downtown Manhattan when the first Kthmore warriors began their search of the city. His team had spent weeks turning the urban environment into a three-dimensional maze where human agility and tactical thinking could overcome alien speed and strength. Every building, every street, and every sewer tunnel had been weaponized by people who understood that sometimes the only way to stop a predator was to become one yourself. The trap was sprung when a squad of Kthmore warriors entered the financial district. Explosive charges brought down carefully weakened buildings to create rubble barriers that funneled the aliens into predetermined kill zones. Human defenders armed with modified mining equipment and construction tools opened fire from concealed positions, using Dr. Lisa Carter's biological analysis to target vulnerable joints in the Kthmore exoskeletons. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to behave like prey. Instead of running or hiding, the humans actively hunted them through an urban environment that had been turned into a massive trap. Every intersection was a potential ambush point. Every building was a sniper's nest, and every subway tunnel was a place where humans could appear without warning to strike and disappear. Claire Bennett led a team of former Special Forces operatives through the London Underground, using the city's extensive tunnel system to move undetected beneath Kthmore positions. Her team had studied every available recording of alien movement patterns and developed tactics specifically designed to exploit the predator's assumptions about prey behavior. The humans would strike from unexpected angles, inflict maximum damage, and withdraw before the Kthmore could respond effectively. The psychological impact on the Kthmore was devastating. For the first time in their species' history, they experienced genuine fear. These ancient predators had awakened expecting to find a galaxy full of weak prey, but instead they were being hunted by creatures that seemed to understand warfare better than they did. The humans used coordinated attacks, sacrificial tactics, and environmental advantages that confused and frustrated the alien warriors. Dr. Lisa Carter had established a research center in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath Washington, D.C., where she continued analyzing Kthmore biology and behavior patterns. Her team had recovered several pieces of alien equipment from previous battles, and their analysis revealed crucial weaknesses in Kthmore technology. The aliens' weapons were designed for intimidation and overwhelming force, not for prolonged combat against adaptive enemies. The information from Lisa's research spread through human and resistance networks using communication systems that the Kthmore couldn't detect or intercept. Human civilians across the planet began modifying their improvised weapons based on precise biological data about alien anatomy. Ordinary people with construction tools and mining equipment could now kill creatures that had terrorized entire star systems. Vexar himself entered the battle when his warriors began reporting impossible losses. The ancient predator had never experienced defeat in personal combat, and he was determined to understand how primitive humans were killing his elite warriors. He found Colonel Ryan Hayes waiting for him in Times Square, surrounded by the wreckage of alien ships and the bodies of fallen Kthmore. The confrontation between Vexar and Ryan was a study in contrasting approaches to combat. The alien predator was faster, stronger, and armed with weapons that could cut through steel, but Ryan had advantages that Vexar couldn't understand. The human had studied every available recording of Kthmore combat techniques and had prepared. Specifically for this encounter, Ryan used the urban environment to his advantage, forcing Vexar to fight on human terms rather than relying on overwhelming physical superiority. The colonel had positioned explosive charges throughout the area and used them to create barriers and distractions that disrupted the aliens' attack patterns. When Vexar tried to use his natural speed and agility, Ryan countered with tactical positioning that turned the predator's advantages into liabilities. The battle lasted 3 hours, far longer than any previous Kthmore engagement. Ryan was wounded multiple times, but he continued fighting with a determination that amazed and terrified his alien opponent. The human refused to run, refused to hide, and refused to submit even when facing certain death. This behavior was completely outside Vexar's experience and understanding of how prey should act. When Ryan finally managed to inflict a serious wound on Vexar using a modified construction tool aimed at a vulnerable joint, the psychological impact was shattering. The ancient predator had never been injured by prey, and the realization that humans could hurt him despite his overwhelming advantages changed everything. Vexar retreated from Earth with less than 40% of his invasion force, leaving behind the bodies of dozens of his warriors. The news of Earth's successful defense spread throughout the galaxy, faster than Kthmore ships could travel. The myth of alien invincibility was shattered, and other species began to find courage they hadn't known they possessed. The Zentari started organizing resistance cells. The Gurthic began studying human military tactics, and refugee populations stopped fleeing toward the galactic core. Colonel Ryan Hayes became a legend among the human resistance, but he understood that the real victory belonged to everyone who had chosen to fight rather than surrender. The humans had proven that even the most terrifying predators could be stopped by prey that refused to act like prey. The galaxy would never be the same again. The news of Earth's victory traveled through the galaxy like wildfire, reaching every refugee camp and resistance cell within weeks. Species that had written themselves off as doomed began to whisper about the humans who had made the impossible possible. The Zentari traders, who had been the first to fall, started organizing underground networks, while the mighty Gurthic Empire began studying human military tactics with desperate intensity. Dr. Jake Morrison had established a research facility on the neutral world of Haven Station, where he led a team of human and alien scientists working to understand Kthmore technology. The wreckage recovered from Earth's battlefields provided crucial insights into alien weapons and ship design. Jake's team discovered that the ancient predators had built their technology for intimidation and overwhelming force, not for the kind of prolonged warfare that humans specialized in. The Kthmore ships were fast and powerful, but they lacked the redundant systems and adaptive capabilities that human military doctrine demanded. Their weapons could destroy cities, but they overheated quickly and required long cooling periods between uses. Most importantly, their targeting systems were designed to track fleeing prey, not enemies who moved in coordinated patterns and used tactical formations. Admiral Susan Brooks had transformed the Earth Defense Force into something the galaxy had never seen before. A military organization dedicated to teaching other species how to fight like humans. Training centers were established on 20 different worlds, where alien volunteers learned human concepts like coordinated attacks, sacrificial tactics, and the psychological warfare that made prey species into predators the first major test. Of this new approach came when the Vraxian colonies requested human assistance against a Kthmore assault fleet. The Vraxians were peaceful engineers who had never developed military capabilities, but they were willing to learn from the species that had defeated Vexar himself. Captain Alex Rodriguez led a mixed human and Vraxian force that would prove whether human tactics could work with alien psychology, the Vraxian homeworld of Nexus Prime was a planet of crystal cities and floating gardens, completely unsuited for the kind of urban warfare that had worked so well on Earth. Alex and his team had to adapt human tactics to an environment where traditional defensive positions were impossible. They used the Vraxians' engineering expertise to create mobile, defensive platforms and coordinated strike teams that could move through the crystal structures without being detected. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 6 days and became a turning point in the war against the Kthmore. The Vraxians learned to fight with human determination while using their own technological advantages to create weapons and tactics that the ancient predators had never encountered. Flying platforms provided mobile fire support, while crystal-based weapons created devastating effects against Kthmore armor. Danny Walsh had become the coordinator for civilian resistance networks across dozens of worlds, teaching basic guerrilla tactics to any species brave enough to stay and fight. His network included Zentari traders who used their commercial connections to smuggle weapons and supplies, Gurthic warriors who provided military expertise, and human civilians who shared their knowledge of improvised weapons and tactical thinking. The resistance cells began coordinating attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously, something that had never been attempted in galactic history. The Kthmore found themselves facing enemies who could share intelligence and resources across vast distances, turning their hunting grounds into battlefields where they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered by species they had dismissed as prey. Dr. Lisa Carter made another breakthrough when she discovered that Kthmore biology was optimized for their original homeworld's environment. The ancient predators were vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies and chemical compounds that were common in industrial processes throughout the galaxy. This information spread through resistance networks, allowing ordinary civilians to create weapons from materials they could find in any manufacturing facility. The psychological impact on the Kthmore was becoming more severe with each defeat. These ancient predators had awakened expecting to find a galaxy full of weak prey, but instead they were facing coordinated resistance from species that had learned to think like humans. The concept of prey that actively hunted predators was so foreign to their nature that many Kthmore warriors began refusing combat orders. Captain Alex Rodriguez had formed an elite unit called the Apex Hunters, composed of volunteers from every species that had joined the resistance. His team specialized in targeting Kthmore command structures and supply lines, using the kind of high-risk operations that other species considered suicidal. Their success rate was extraordinary because they combined human, tactical thinking with alien technological capabilities and species-specific advantages. The Apex Hunter's most successful operation was the destruction of a Kthmore breeding facility on the edge of known space. The facility had been producing new warriors to replace losses from the ongoing war, but Alex's team used captured alien technology to infiltrate the base and destroy it from within. The psychological impact of losing their ability to reproduce was devastating to Kthmore morale. Admiral Brooks coordinated the first major counteroffensive against Kthmore territory, using fleets composed of ships from dozens of different species. The combined force used human tactical doctrine with alien technology to create capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. Fast Zentari scouts provided intelligence, while heavy Gurthic battleships delivered devastating firepower under human strategic command. The Battle of the Outer Rim was the largest space engagement in galactic history, involving over 10,000 ships from 30 different species. The Kthmore fleet was larger and more powerful, but they were facing enemies who had learned to coordinate their attacks and support each other in ways that the ancient predators couldn't understand or counter. Effectively, the victory at the Outer Rim shattered the last remnants of Kthmore confidence. Their fleet retreated toward their home systems, abandoning conquered territories and leaving behind scattered garrisons that were quickly overwhelmed by local resistance forces. The species that had once ruled the galaxy through fear and intimidation were now running from the very creatures they had considered prey. The galaxy had been transformed by the human example. Species that had never cooperated before were working together with unprecedented coordination. The old boundaries between predator and prey had been replaced by something new, a coalition of different species united by the human principle that no creature, no matter how powerful, had the right to dominate others through violence alone. Vexar the Endless retreated to his home system of Vexari, where he began preparing for a final confrontation with the coalition forces. The ancient predator understood that his species' age of dominance was ending, but he was determined to prove that the Kthmore were still the galaxy's apex predators. The stage was set for a battle that would determine the future of every species in known space. The final battle for the galaxy began when the coalition fleet arrived at Vexari, the ancient homeworld of the Kthmore. Admiral Susan Brooks commanded ships from 40 different species, each one carrying weapons and tactics that had been developed through hard-won experience fighting the galaxy's former apex predators. The fleet was not just a military force but a symbol of everything the galaxy had become since humans had taught them to fight back. Vexar the Endless waited for them in the system's asteroid field, surrounded by the last of his warrior fleet. The ancient predator had gathered every surviving Kthmore ship for this final confrontation, knowing that defeat here would mean the end of his species' dominance forever. He had ruled the galaxy for centuries before hibernation, and the concept of losing to prey species was so foreign to his nature that he refused to consider retreat. The space battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Kthmore ships were faster and more powerful than anything the Coalition possessed, but they were facing enemies who had learned to coordinate their attacks and support each other in ways that the ancient predators couldn't understand. Zentari scouts provided targeting data while Gurthek battleships delivered devastating volleys under human tactical command. Colonel Ryan Hayes led the ground assault on the Kthmore stronghold, a massive fortress built into the largest asteroid in the system. His team included volunteers from every species that had joined the resistance, each one bringing unique abilities and perspectives to the mission. The diversity that had once made the galaxy weak against unified predators now became its greatest strength. The fortress was defended by automated systems that had been designed to repel attackers using overwhelming force. But the coalition forces used tactics that confused and frustrated the alien technology. They moved in small groups, used coordinated distractions, and employed sacrificial attacks that drew defensive fire away from the main assault teams. The Kthmore had never faced enemies who would deliberately sacrifice themselves to achieve strategic objectives. Dr. Lisa Carter accompanied the assault team, carrying equipment designed to analyze and disable Kthmore technology from the inside. Her research had revealed that the ancient predator systems were vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies that could be generated using modified civilian equipment. The knowledge that had started with her first encounter on the research station was now being used to end the war. The breakthrough came when Lisa's team reached the fortress's central core, where they discovered the hibernation chambers that had preserved the Kthmore through their 1,000-year sleep. The technology was incredibly advanced, but it relied on biological processes that could be disrupted by the right combination of chemicals and electromagnetic pulses. Lisa realized that they could prevent any remaining Kthmore from entering hibernation again. Vexar himself appeared as the coalition forces reached the fortress's command center, determined to face his enemies in personal combat. The ancient predator had never been defeated in single combat, and he challenged the coalition to send their best warrior to face him. The galaxy watched as Colonel Ryan Hayes stepped forward, not as a representative of humanity alone, but as the champion of every species that had chosen to fight rather than submit. The duel between Vexar and Ryan was a clash between two completely different approaches to combat. The alien predator was faster, stronger, and armed with weapons that had been perfected over millions of years of evolution. Ryan was smaller, weaker, and equipped with modified human military gear that had been designed for fighting other humans. But he had advantages that Vexar couldn't understand or counter. Ryan had studied every available recording of Kthmore combat techniques and had trained specifically for this encounter. He used the fortress's architecture to his advantage, forcing Vexar to fight on human terms rather than relying on overwhelming physical superiority. The Colonel had learned from Earth's greatest military minds that the key to defeating superior opponents was to make them fight your kind of battle rather than their own. The battle lasted 2 hours, far longer than any previous Kthmore engagement. Ryan was wounded multiple times, but he continued fighting with a determination that amazed and terrified his alien opponent. The human refused to run, refused to hide, and refused to submit even when facing certain death. This behavior was completely outside Vexar's experience and understanding of how prey should act. When Ryan finally managed to inflict a mortal wound on Vexar using a combination of human tactics and alien technology, the psychological impact was shattering. The ancient predator had never been defeated by prey, and the realization that his species' age of dominance was ending changed everything. Vexar's final words were a grudging acknowledgement that the galaxy had produced something more dangerous than any apex predator, a species that refused to be prey. The death of Vexar marked the end of Kthmore resistance throughout the galaxy. The remaining warriors faced a choice between adaptation and extinction, and most chose to integrate into the new galactic order rather than continue fighting a war they could no longer win. Dr. Lisa Carter led the integration effort, helping former predators find new roles in a galaxy that no longer feared them. Some Kthmore became protectors of the worlds they had once hunted, using their abilities to defend against other threats from the galaxy's dangerous frontier regions. Others joined mixed-species exploration teams, where their predatory instincts could be channeled into discovering new worlds and resources. The transformation was not easy, but it was possible because the galaxy had learned to value cooperation over domination. The reformed Galactic Council met on the neutral world of Harmony Station, where representatives from every species worked together to establish new principles for interspecies relations. Ambassador Kate Phillips addressed the assembly with humanity's final message about the war. They had not defeated the Kthmore because they were stronger, but because they had refused to accept that strength alone determined who survived. The galaxy that emerged from the Kthmore crisis was fundamentally different from what had existed before. The old order of predator and prey had been replaced by something new, a coalition of different species united by the understanding that diversity was strength and that no creature, no matter how evolved or powerful, had the right to dominate others through violence alone. Admiral Brooks established the Galactic Defense Force, an organization dedicated to protecting all species from future threats while maintaining the cooperative spirit that had made victory possible. The force included ships and personnel from every member species, each one contributing their unique capabilities to the common defense. The age of predators was over, and the age of cooperation had begun. Forged in the fires of a war that had taught the galaxy that the most dangerous thing in the universe was not the strongest predator, but the weakest prey that refused to act like prey.